Hey guys, no video for our healthcare in Japan playlist. As you can imagine, we are getting questions every day from people asking us what's happening in Japan with the COVID-19. So we haven't addressed it terribly much unless we've had something to show you or some information to share with you that we thought was of some interest, because talking about it unnecessarily or just to get views seems to be a very common thing at the moment, and we don't want to sort of play into that. However, a couple of interesting statistics have come up, a couple of interesting ones, and one amazing one that we just had to talk about because we knew some of you guys would be interested. So, first of all, the statistics from the Ministry of Health, the usual statistics that they put out every day to show us the latest update. So, as of today, these are the total numbers. So, just to put it all in perspective, will include the population of Japan, 127 million people, 15,854 have tested positive. There are 5,162 active cases. 9,851 people have been discharged, so they've been sent home. They've gone to hospital and been sent home. There are 259 serious cases, and there's been a total of 668 deaths. So they haven't done too badly, have they? So that's the total statistics for Japan as of today. So a couple of other things have come up we thought you'd be interested in. One of them is that the Tokyo prefectural government did their statistics for the quarter, for the 3 months, and reported that the total mortality rate, so the number of total people who died for whatever causes in that quarter in the Tokyo prefecture, was down 0.4% on the average over the last 4 years. So compared to the last 3 or 4 years, the total number of deaths in Tokyo from any cause are actually down. So isn't that amazing? So I think everyone was surprised by that. Even the guys that reported it were surprised by that. So there wasn't any explanation or theories on why that might be that we've seen. We'd have to imagine there'd have to be some benefit in the way people have been living the last 3 or 4 months in Japan, with the extra masks and the extra washing of their hands and the social distancing and everything, that maybe that's prevented other things that kill people, you know. Maybe less people have died of flu this year than normally do, or maybe less people have been hit by cars because they've been staying home or something. But either way, the end result was slightly, 0.4%, it's nothing, right? It's probably fair to say it's almost the same number of deaths in the Tokyo prefecture during that quarter as is averaged out over the last 4 years. So it's pretty amazing, isn't it? So a couple of other statistics you might be interested in. Japan averages 3,500 road fatalities a year. They've been trying to get it down, and it is down. It used to be 7,000 or 8,000 a year, and they've got it down to about 3,500 a year. So that means that during that same quarter, the total number of deaths was about 850 on average in Japan from traffic accidents, road deaths. So that could be car versus car, or car versus truck, or car versus pedestrian, or car versus bicycle. Pedestrian accidents and bicycle accidents are pretty common in Japan, as we've talked about with you guys before, and about how careful you have to be in Japan when it comes to being on the road. And interestingly, so that's on average, that'd be about 850 road deaths during that same period. So there's been 668 COVID-related deaths, and during the same period, about 850 road deaths. So again, statistically, and some people really hate these comparisons. We did a video when COVID first was identified in Japan. We did a video and made some comparisons. One of the comparisons was comparing with flu, and talking about, compared to flu. And some people lost their minds about that. We didn't say it was the same as flu. We didn't say it was the danger level was the same as flu. We didn't say that people should go out without masks or not take any precautions. All we said was a comparison with the number of people who die each year from flu, because the same thing happens every year. People die. People who are already sick or old and sick who get the flu, get complications because of the flu and they die. It happens every year. It's sad, but it's true. It happens every year. And often it's the end result's pneumonia, which seems to be the end result with COVID that kills people, is the pneumonia in the end. Interesting too, the Tokyo Prefectural government talking about the total number of deaths and identifying which ones were COVID, said that as a matter of course, when people die of pneumonia-related symptoms, that they always do a CT scan, and they also do a PCR test. So their point was that they're very confident that they're identifying that the people have actually died of COVID-related complications, that the government's confident that they're identifying them because they do those CT scans and they do those PCR tests. So it's interesting, isn't it? So yeah, the comparison thing. Some people lose their minds at the comparison thing. But, if just purely from a point of view of people living in Japan, and we know that the statistics in other countries are sometimes better and sometimes much, much worse than what they are in Japan. We know that. We have friends living in Spain, and the situation in Spain was ridiculous. They were having 700 or 800 people dying every day in Spain. Right, so we know that a lot of other countries are having it a lot worse than what Japan has, but that's not our job to report on that. Our job's just to report on what we see in Japan. So that's what we've seen in Japan. Those are the statistics that we've seen. So again, just looking purely at the numbers, obviously too. The other interesting things were too that you guys would have all seen the charts that show the number of deaths. There's almost no deaths in Japan for people under 50 related to the COVID. That most of the deaths were people over 50, and most of them were over 70 or 80. So obviously those people are weaker and are more seriously affected if they get it. So that was interesting as well. But if you just look, if we ignore that for a second, I mean, if you take that in consideration for a second, if you're under 50 and you're in Japan, statistically, and again, it's a comparison based on statistics, statistically you have a much greater chance of being hurt or killed in a car accident than you would of catching COVID, right, or dying of COVID, right? So statistically, and this is the amazing thing, everyone's been so careful, and obviously that's why the numbers in Japan are pretty good. Everyone here, they wear their masks anyway. A lot of these guys here wear their masks every year anyway, as we've showed you. So it's no big deal. Japanese people to put on masks is what they do anyway. And they all wash their hands every time they come home. Everyone washes their hands and gargles. That's just a thing that they do. We saw on the internet that it was reported that Japanese system is to stop COVID is that people gargle. I don't know where that came from, but it's just what a lot of Japanese people do automatically when they come home from somewhere. They walk in the house, they wash their hands, and they gargle. It's just what they do. We reported on that years ago, so it's not COVID related. So we're not surprised with the way that Japanese people adapt, with the way they are anyway, with being careful about germs. Social distancing, Japanese people don't touch each other usually anyway. Usually they stand back and bow at each other and yoroshiku, and that's it, So there's not a lot of touching. Social distancing's a natural thing for these guys. The only exception to that is when they queue, and we've showed you that before too. When they queue, their own social distancing rules go out the window, and they stand really close to each other. So they stopped doing that. They put markings out on the floor. We showed you that too. They put markings out on the floor now to show you the social distance that you should maintain when you're queuing. And they've been doing that. So obviously it's been working, but the point of that was, that ramble was that, if you're in Japan and you're under 50, as we've said before, look out on the road, because they're still, even though they're so careful with their masks and their alcohol and everything, washing their hands and everything, they're still driving around with their kids standing on the passenger seat of the car, looking at their face against the window, and they're still driving around looking at their phones, and we see it every single day. Kids standing, the kids like to stand between the front seats of the car. We often see them standing between the front seats, between mum and dad, standing there as the car's driving along. We see that all the time. And those big vans that are popular now. And the kids just sort of wander around like it's a room and come and stand between mum and dad at the front, which would be the worst place to be in an accident, wouldn't it? Because standing between the two front seats, you know, if you have an accident, obviously they're going to go straight through the window. If the airbag doesn't take their head off, you know, and they're driving around looking down at the phone, the number of tops of heads we see, people driving along and you see the top of their head coming towards you and then they glance up and the head goes down again, and they glance up and the head goes down again, and they're looking at their phone or sending a message or reading a message or doing something with their phone. So they still do that. So it's amazing that it's just the amount of exposure that it gets, doesn't it? And again, people always manage to take whatever you say on the internet and twist it round and make it sound insane, right? Again, we're not saying that people shouldn't wear masks. Let's make it clear. People should wear masks, they should wash their hands regularly and maintain social distancing. You know, yes, they should. But it's interesting that the profile that the COVID has got people doing all that, but they're still driving around with the kids standing on the front seat and staring at their phones. You know, that there's no profile to that, so everyone's just continuing to do that. You know, so yeah, interesting, isn't it?
およそ300メートル先、右折専用レーンがあります。ご注意ください。
Sorry about that, guys. Lost the plot there for a second. Lost the train of thought, focusing on the car, driving the car, which a person should do, shouldn't they? Speaking of people talking on their phones. We've had people criticise that for that too before. You know, you criticise people for talking on the phone, but you make videos while you're driving. That's true, but the way I see it is driving along talking like this is no different than driving along talking to a passenger in the car, or three passengers, or having a conversation with three passengers in the car. It's basically the same thing, isn't it? So don't see any danger of that. It's not against the law. Not against the law to drive along talking to a camera, and you know, the way we see it is no different than talking to a passenger. It's just as talking to 1,000 passengers instead of one, you know. So just one more thing before I go. Interesting, and you guys will probably relate to this because you probably see the same thing in your own countries, but it seems that there's a real scale. There's a real scale of people, and it's surprising who is where on the scale. You know, our friends and family in Japan and our neighbours and everybody. It's interesting to see where they turn up on the scale. And by the scale, I mean the people at the lower end of the scale, at say, let's put at the -10 mark on the scale. -10 mark on the scale would be people who just think that the whole COVID thing's just a ridiculous waste of time. It's no different than a cold, and that it's not worth worrying about. And those people are just going about their normal lives without taking any precautions at all and without worrying about anything, right? And you guys have probably seen people in your countries doing that who just don't care. You know, COVID, I don't care. You know, no mask, no washing their hands, no nothing. Standing there looking at people, you know, 2 feet away from people, and they don't care, you know. And we do occasionally come across people like that. So they're like on the -10 level, right? On the 0 level, on the average level, you've got people who wear a mask, wash their hands regularly, and maintain social distancing. But other than that, they're not worried about it too much. You know, they don't sort of worry about it. They just take the precautions, and they're sort of reasonable and logical. They're the people that we sort of relate to, that are about, we'll call that 0. We'll call that the median line, the sensible line, 0. And so you got the -10s of the people who just don't care at all. And then you got the +10s, or the +10s, that's a funny way to put it. But the people that are plus 10, we'll call it +10. People at +10s are the ones who are losing their minds, right? Some of you would have seen the video about the lady at the home centre, you know, screaming, the American lady at the home centre in Japan, screaming, you know, back off! So she's obviously a 10. She was there buying airtight containers and wearing camouflage pants. She was definitely a +10. She was right up there. And the +10s, they're the ones that are obsessing on it, aren't they? They're the ones that just cannot stop thinking about it. They can't stop posting stuff on social media about it. We know And we've come across a few of those here. We know one lady who's got a couple of kids, and she's a nice lady, and she's probably about a 0, right? She's probably she's pretty sensible and pretty logical. But her mother-in-law is a +10. Her mother-in-law heard on TV, and we hear this sort of stuff, and no doubt you guys do too, people that say they heard something on TV or they heard something on the internet, and the mother-in-law heard on TV that the disease is airborne and you can catch it in from the air, right? And she did, obviously not a very scientific-minded person. So her thinking is, if you go outside your house and breathe the air, you could catch it, right? And so she's been hounding her daughter-in-law to not leave the house, right? And we've explained before, the Japanese government haven't stopped us doing anything. They haven't stopped us going anywhere. They closed down the pachinko, the gambling houses, and they closed down a couple of things like that. They asked them to close. But pretty much we can go anywhere and do anything. We can go to restaurants, we can go to anywhere, right? They've tried to close beaches and things, but they just closed the car parks to the beaches and the car parks to the parks, and that didn't really stop anybody. And they didn't ban us from doing anything like that anyway. So we can go to the beach if we want to, we can go to the park if we want to, we can go to a restaurant if we want to, we can go shopping, we can do anything we want. You can pretty much do anything. The only things we haven't been able to do is things in government buildings. So our dojo, our martial arts dojo, is a government-owned building, and it's closed. So we've had no martial arts for 2 months, which is terribly tragic. But other than that, we can do everything we want to do, right? But this poor lady, her mother-in-law has just lost her mind and just insisting that they don't go anywhere. And so this lady's been at home with her 2 kids pretty well constantly for the last, 2.5, 3 months. And we've seen some people like that, you know, the +10s, and just losing it, you know, and really irrational. You know, that's the thing. As a 0, as a big 0, you know, that just looks at it from a scientific or logical way to look at it, you know, a lot of that behaviour is just irrational. You know, believing that if you just go outside to an empty park that's got no one else in it and breathe the air, that you could catch the disease. You know, the lack of logic and reason there. Isn't it amazing? Isn't it surprising which people turn out to be like that too? You know, we've had friends and family members that have turned out to be like that we just never expected they'd be like that. People that are normally fairly rational. And there's also been other people that we know that we expected to be +10s that were actually quite calm and rational and reasonable and logical about it. So it's interesting, isn't it? You know, we're seeing that scale with friends and family and neighbours about where they fall on that scale. And of course, if they are a +10, there's no point in discussing it with them because they won't be budged, right? Because, you know, someone said this, they heard this thing on TV or they heard this thing on the internet, and that's it. Then you can't say, but wait a minute, you know, wait a minute, it's just not floating around in the air on the wind, you know. There's got to be somewhere nearby who's carrying it, otherwise it's not going to be there. So anyway, and of course we see them on the internet, don't we? We see them on social media and we see them on YouTube and we see them everywhere, that whole scale of people. The guys in the States with their guns saying, yeah, going and protesting and saying we want to go outside and I've got a gun, right? I don't know where the gun comes into that logic, but anyway, we've got a gun and we want to go outside, okay. So you got those guys, haven't you? They're down on the -10 scale, aren't they? COVID's not a problem. We just want to take our guns for a walk. They're -10 guys. And then you got the people hiding in their closets, that's the +10 guys. So anyway, that was that. So hopefully those statistics are of interest to somebody, and the rest was just rambling pointlessly, really. But I mean, we've been trying to avoid talking about this topic, so when we do address the topic, we sort of want to get it all off the chest, get it out there, get that scale, the scale, 0 to -10 and 0 to +10. I bet you're all sitting there now thinking of different people and where they fall on that scale, right? And where you yourself might fall on that scale. Yep. Anyway, there it was. Hopefully that was of some interest to somebody. If nothing else, it was a nice drive out in the countryside, wasn't it? There it was. More videos coming soon.